Hello there, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be talking about the anatomy of the heart. It is amazing how the heart works every second of every single day for us. So the heart is one of the most important organs that function as a muscular pump that pump blood and maintain the flow of blood throughout the circulatory system. It is important for health professionals to know the location of the heart because this allowed for accurate stethoscope placement for heart sound, administer CPR, which is also called the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and the placement for ECG chest lead. The heart lies within the pericardium in the mediastinum, located just between two lungs and just above the diaphragm. It tilts toward the left and its half of the heart is somewhat to the left body median plane. The apex, which is the inferior tip of the heart, is directed to the left and is located on the mid-clavicle line in the fifth intercostal space. So, in order to protect the heart, there is the layers of pericardium that surrounds the heart and anchor it within the mediastinum. The pericardium itself consists of two layers. The first one is the strong fibrous connective tissue outer layer that helps to limit the unnecessary movement of the heart. The second layer, which is the inner layer, is called the serous pericardium that contains both parietal and visceral layer. And then in between the parietal and visceral layer, there is this slit-like space with serous fluid that serves as a lubricant to facilitate the cardiac movement. So how can you remember this? The lecturer taught me to remember it is that we would remember it as fart, police, smell, villain. So fibrous parietal, serous visceral. So fart, police, smell, villain. I know it's actually something a bit odd, but it actually sticks to today. My drawing is not that great, so I'm not sure whether you all know who the cartoon villain is, but if you do, I would appreciate if you could comment down below. So anyway, back to the heart. The villain, which is the visceral layer of the serous pericardium, is also called the epicardium of the heart wall. And then there is the myocardium, which is the cardiac muscle layer. So this muscle layer is thick and is responsible for pumping. And lastly, the endocardium, which is the inner surface. And here you can see the trabeculae carneae that projects from the inner surface of the right and left ventricle of the heart. So now that we have covered the location and the heart wall, let's take a closer look in the inner structure of the heart. The heart contains four chambers, the left atrium and the right atrium, which is also called the upper heart chamber, and the left and right ventricle, which is also called the lower heart chamber. So there are also four valves, one for each chamber. The valve ensure unidirectional flow of the blood. So it's very important to remember that the valve actually helps the blood to flow in one direction and prevent for prolapse. And the two major types of valve are the atrioventricular valve, which is called the AV valve, and the semilunar valve. So when I said AV valve, there are two valves that fall under this type, which is called the mitral valve, which is also called the bicuspid valve and the tricuspid valve. So these valves are located between the atria, so the upper heart chamber, and the edge are actually attached to chordae tendineae, which kind of looks like a guitar chord. So, you know, when we say chordae tendineae, like the chord, just remember how it looks like a guitar chord. And these cords are then attached below to the pupillary muscle. The semilunar valve, on the other hand, is the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. So a quick description about each chamber. The right atrium receives the oxygenated blood from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. Some unique feature of the right atrium is that there is a depression in the septum called the fossa ovalis. Here in the right atrium has thick and coarse pectinate muscle as compared to the left atrium. The right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve. The walls is thicker here than the atria, but not as thick as the left ventricle. Here in the right ventricle contain the trabeculate carinae that we had mentioned earlier before. So here the blood flows from the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery to be oxygenated in the lungs. So in this case, pulmonary artery is the one that's going away from the heart into the lung, so it's carrying deoxygenated blood. Alright? And then the left side of the heart contains the oxygenated blood. So here you can see it's red in color. It starts with the left atrium receiving the oxygenated blood from the pulmonary vein. The bicuspid, or called the mitral valve, guards the blood passage from the left atrium to the left ventricle. The most important characteristic of the left ventricle is that the wall is thicker. So you would wonder, what is the reason why? So the reason why is because the left ventricle actually pumps oxygenated blood at a high pressure throughout the systemic circulation. So imagine you're trying to pump something to somewhere where it's really far. So you do need like a thick pump. So that's why the left ventricular muscle is actually much thicker than the right ventricle. So if the heart supply blood to the body, so what would supply blood to the heart? Have you thought of that question? So there is where the right and left coronary artery comes in. Some of the branches of the right coronary artery is the posterior interventricular artery, which is also called the PIA, and the atrioventricular nodal artery. So, whereas the branches of the left coronary artery are the left anterior descending and the left circumflex artery. So how I remember it is that the left coronary artery branches is the left anterior descending, which is LAD, LAD. So how I remember it is that the right and the left each have kind of like a person. So like the right side, the right coronary artery has Pia, so it's a woman, and then the left coronary artery has LAD, left anterior descending. LAD. So LAD is actually means a guy in Irish. Alright, so when we have artery supplying the blood, then we would also have venous drainage of the heart because we need to drain the deoxygenated blood back to the heart, and that's when the coronary sinus comes into place. So a point to remember is that it is a continuation of the great cardiac vein and it drains into the right atrium. So lastly, let's talk a bit more about the nerve supply of the heart. So the nerve supply of the heart is the sympathetic fiber that arises from the cervical and the upper thoracic portion, whereas it is also supplied by the parasympathetic fiber that comes from the vagus nerve. So this is a really quick summary of the anatomy of the heart. So it is also like the important points that you should remember before going into your exam. So I hope that I make this a bit more interesting, and it should be, and I hope you like my video. If you like my video, I would appreciate if you could like, comment, and subscribe this channel, because I will be posting more interesting videos and fun anatomy and physiology videos for you to enjoy. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.